In 1967, there was a guy born with only one hand. Tell you what it looked like. He had a left arm that looked like this, just like mine, but his right arm stopped right there. No wrist, no hand, no fingers, no fingernails. It was just a nub. He goes to kindergarten, comes back and he says, "Hey Mom, Dad, why am I the only kid in my kindergarten class with one hand? All the other kids have two." Mom and Dad said, "The doctors don't know what happened, son. It's just the way you were born." The boy's name was Jim. Well, Jim said, "Mom and Dad, my kindergarten teacher taught us about this game called baseball. Can I still play baseball even though I only have one hand?" Yeah. "Sure you can, son. You just might have to work twice as hard as everybody else since you only got the one hand." Well, Jim went in the backyard that very day and he picked up a baseball and he started tossing it up like this right here. And then he started to walk around his neighborhood and he noticed that all the kids in his neighborhood, they'd catch the ball with one hand and they'd throw it with the other. So he found himself a glove and he rested it right there on his nub. And he had a wall in his backyard. He'd take the ball and he'd throw it up against that wall. What would it do? Bounce back. As it bounced back, he'd take the glove, put it on his one hand, field the ball. Then he said, "What do I do now?" Did he give up on baseball? No. Would I be telling the story about Jim Abbott right now if he gave up? No. He came up with a magic trick. He took his thumb out of the holster of the glove like that. He pinned his glove up against his chest like that. Took his nub right here and rested it so he could flip the glove upside down, and what'd the ball do? Right into his hand. Glove finished right where it started, and he did that drill over and over and over, 1 hour a day. Sometimes 2 hours a day. Everybody say, "Wow." Well, he was known to hit one-handed home runs in his Little League. Also played basketball and football in middle school and high school. But by the time he got to 11th grade, guess what his favorite thing to do was? Pitch. And this is what it looked like. Lift the leg, fire. 92 miles an hour. As soon as he pitched it, he'd put his glove on the hand and wait for them to hit it back to him so he could do his magic trick. He was so good in high school, he went to college at the University of Michigan. He was so good in college, he got invited to a tryout for the United States Olympic team. Who's ever heard of the Olympics? He had to drive his old beat-up truck all the way from Michigan down to Florida for that tryout. Uh-oh. His truck broke down in Tennessee. He was late for the tryout. By the time he got to the tryout, the coach said, "Our roster's full. Jim Abbott, you can head back home." Did Jim get in his truck and go back home? No. "Coach, I know I'm late. I know I only have one hand, but please, just give me one shot. Let me show you what I can do. And you can bring the 3 best hitters at this tryout up to bat." Coach said, "You sure about that?" "Yes, sir." Jim Abbott gets on the mound. 3 best hitters in the country step up to home plate. And what do? Strike out, strike out, strike out. The coach said, "Oh, snap. That was lit." Now, when I say, "Oh, snap," you say, "That was lit." Oh, snap. That was lit. But then the coach was like, "Wait a second. He's only got one hand. What if the other team bunts?" So the coach brings up his 3 fastest runners and he tells them all to bunt. Tap it right back to the pitcher. Jim Abbott throws it 92 miles an hour, First guy bunts, runs over, fields the ball, does his magic trick, spins and fires to first base. But he'd been practicing in his backyard his whole life. It looked like this. Kung Fu Panda. 1 out. Next guy bunts. Skibbity doo-dah panda. 2 outs. Next guy steps in. Coach, ball game's nose hair. 3 outs. All the coaches said, "Oh, snap." That was so lit, Jim Abbott. You're going to start in the first game of the Olympics against the most powerful hitters on the planet, Cuba. And oh yeah, it's going to be in Cuba in front of 50,000 Cuban fans. Are you scared? I'm not scared, Coach. I was born for this moment. I'll be ready. On the day of the big game, the newspaper said, "One-armed man has no chance against Cuba." Well, that was kind of mean, wasn't it? But Jim Abbott was no stranger to a bully. When he was growing up, there were kids in his neighborhood that would say, "You look funny, you can't play with us." Or, "You've only got one hand, you should quit baseball." But Jim Abbott always noticed something about those bullies. All those people saying mean things, they had one thing in common. All of them were very sad, and they didn't like themselves. They were insecure. So they would say mean things to other people to try and drag them into their sad bowl of soup. That's what a bully is. Jim Abbott threw that newspaper in the trash. He headed to the field and started warming up. As 50,000 Cuban fans, they'd all read that newspaper as well. They were all thinking, one hand, we're going to win 93-0. Well, Jim Abbott pitched 8 innings. Guess how many runs Cuba scored? 0. Donut. As he walked off the field, he tipped his cap to all those fans. And every single one of those fans, including the guy that wrote the newspaper article, they did this.
Why? Because it was so good.
Yeah, they slow clapped him off the field and gave him a standing ovation. He won a gold medal that year, and then he went and pitched for some team called the Angels. But the best day of his life came in 1993. He's pitching for the New York Yankees. It's the 9th inning. He's pitching against Cleveland. Guess how many runs Cleveland had? Guess how many hits Cleveland had? He's pitching a no-hitter, and the first batter in the top of the 9th inning was the fastest runner in baseball, Kenny Lofton, and guess what he tries to do? Kenny Lofton, he lays down a beautiful bunt down the third base line. By the time Jim Abbott can get to the ball, he's already past first base. Safe. No hitter's over. But something real weird happened. The ball hit a rock and bounced foul, and the umpire said, "Foul ball." Next pitch, ground ball to second base, 1 out. Phew! Next pitch, crack of the bat, deep fly ball to center. Bernie Williams is going back to the fence. He finds the fence with his hand, he bends his knees, he leaps up, and he missed it. Home run. Just kidding, he caught it. 2 outs, thank you, Bernie Williams. Phew! The final batter hits a ground ball to the shortstop, Randy Velarde. He goes triangle, alligator, vacuum, point, knock, fire. Don Mattingly over at first base goes meet, squeeze, and freeze. 3 outs, no hitter, Jim Abbott. Oh, snap. Wade Boggs was at third base. He rushes into the mound. Don Mattingly rushes in, and they both give Jim Abbott a mustache sandwich. The entire Yankee team came rushing out of the dugout, lifted him up on their shoulders, carried Jim Abbott off the field because he'd just become the first and only pitcher to throw a no-hitter with one hand. Jim Abbott is still alive, and he actually travels around the world and he tells his story to kids that have no arms or legs. He told his story to a kid named Luke. Luke is a catcher in Tennessee. Luke will do this when somebody tries to steal. Wham! And he'll throw them out. Now, I've been telling the Jim Abbott story for 20 years to over 100,000 kids. And I always had a dream that maybe one day, while I was telling the Jim Abbott story, maybe the real Jim Abbott would show up. Well, just last year, I'm telling this story just up the road here in Orange County, California, and guess who showed up? Don Mattingly. Who thinks that's a joke? I was at the point in the story where Jim was pitching in Cuba, and I look towards the parking lot, and this guy was walking my way. He comes closer, and he says, "Hey, Coach Ballgame, I hear you're telling my story. I'm Jim Abbott." That's Jim Abbott, and that's me. Somebody took a picture of the moment when we met and then made a shirt out of it. It says, "It happened." What happened?
It happened.
My dream came true. Jim Abbott talked to all the kids, and he actually brought Coach Kershaw up and played catch with him. And he showed all the kids how he could catch and throw with one hand. You can see that video on my YouTube channel. Coach Ballgame and Jim Abbott. As Jim Abbott was leaving, he said one thing to the kids. "Hey kids, other people's opinion of you does not matter." Nobody thought he could make it to the major leagues with only one hand. Did anybody think he could throw a no-hitter with one hand? Or win a gold medal in the Olympics? He believed in himself, didn't he? That's right. Jim Abbott, he lives that way. Let's give him an attaboy. 1, 2, 3. As he was walking to his car, I said, "Jim Abbott, the kids will never, ever forget this moment." He turns back and he says, "They'll remember you more, Coach Ballgame." I said, "Oh, snap." That is the Jim Abbott story.